Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined today by Dustin Furman, executive producer of Last Stand Media and co-host of Sacred Symbols. How are you today, my friend?
I am well. I feel like I've had a great weekend, both in the terms of playing lots of video games and, we're talking about the Uncharted movie, as we're going to talk about here in a few. And I had a great time going out with some friends to see it. And I think you had a similar experience as well. Were you Papa Colin taking the fam, right?
Yeah, I took my nephews. What happened was my brother-in-law, Derek, and he's married to my sister Dana, and they have 3 boys. And I've gotten those boys. People that have followed me for a long time know that I've just totally indoctrinated these 3 boys in PlayStation. Just totally, completely indoctrinated them. To the point where my youngest nephew, Dash, wears Nathan Drake's ring around his neck, and has been for a long time, or a while now. And I got him a sweet Uncharted 4 poster and all that. So they're into it. They love I got them their PS3, I got them their PS4, I got them their PS5. I also got them their Switch. So I don't want to hear any of that. Didn't get him an Xbox though. But this was a natural movie for us to see. And my brother-in-law, Derek, and I've known him since 1997. And we've played many, many, many games together. And he used to actually come over with my sister Dana when they were in college and afterwards. And he would just come into my room and play games and just literally stay there and just play games for like days. And so he plays Horizon and Uncharted and Spider-Man when he can. And what's fun about him is that he's the head of all of the middle schools in our county of like 500,000 people. So he's like a pretty big deal in his world or whatever. And I love how he's just a gamer and he's just down. So nonetheless, he and I and the 3 boys went and got dinner, some burgers, some wings. And then we went and saw the movie. And it was a good time. We got the IMAX 2D thing. First of all, I have not been to a movie since 2019. That's number one. The last movie I saw in the theater was Rocket Man, which was good. I like that movie. And then, so that was fun. And then I got my big thing of popcorn. I got a medium Coke, which was a liter of Coke. I don't know what that was all about. So we had a nice little family gathering, not too many other people in the theater. And so what was your situation like where you went?
So I went with Holly, of course, my wife Holly, my friend Brandon and his girlfriend Lauren went with us. And we also brought along Ben. So it was like a nice full carload. And we went to this Chinese restaurant beforehand that was right near the theater that was a little overpriced, but that's okay. It was still a good time. What surprised me, though, which I think this is maybe a good lead in to some parts of this conversation, I guess the meta conversation around the movie, is that I went and saw this movie technically not in Butler, where I live. I drove 30 minutes away to an even smaller town called Sarver, which is actually, ironically, they have a way better theater than us here in Butler. But anyway, so we went there. This movie was packed on the second weekend. And what surprised me the most, and I guess this really shouldn't have been surprising now in hindsight, is that the theater was probably half women and many groups of teenage girls. Well, I mean, probably
Tom
like
Holland,
18.
Right?
Yeah.
Gotta be Tom Holland, right?
That's what I was thinking. I was like, damn, this is, I guess we should have expected this because we've talked about the allure of Tom Holland to the non-gamer crowd. But there was just tons and tons of, the ladies were there for Tom Holland. And I think that they were well served then in this movie as well.
Yeah, it seems to have brought in this unholy alliance of folks into seeing it. It's so funny because we got our assigned seats and there was like no one in there. But it was, it's 7:45 at night here in suburbia on Sunday. I don't know that it was the best time for everyone to go see it, but that's when we saw it. And I'm curious, what did you think of the film? What are your takeaways of the Uncharted movie?
I was trying to figure out how I was going to say this from the moment the movie was done. And I don't know if I still have the quite right way to say it. It was better than I expected by a lot, actually. And there were some elements of this movie that I was surprised on how well they nailed it. At the same time, though, there were a lot of aspects of this movie that were the minimum of passable for me. A few cringe moments and parts where the feeling or the Uncharted spirit was just not there. Some pacing issues. So I'm in a weird spot. I'm actually feeling more positive than I thought, but I'm not saying like this is our movie. This is what we've been waiting for. Like it was as good as a Tom Holland, Nathan Drake with what's his face as Sully, Mark Wahlberg as Sully. You know, it's like they did a pretty good job for what I thought it was going to be, I guess. But what did you think, Colin? Just because I know you have a much longer legacy than me with well, I guess not. I got in at Uncharted 2, but you were there from day one. This, Nathan Drake, your boy. How did they do him on this one?
Yeah, I agree with you about it far exceeded my expectations. And I think that it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I think that the things that they got right in the movie were the fun, the action, and all of this. But the things that I think that they got wrong have to do with the characters. And that might be the most devastating part of the film, specifically Sully. And I want to talk about that. But Michael Alamo wrote into us. I did solicit inquiries on Patreon. We got a lot of them for the film. He says, "Hey, fellas, I can admit when I'm wrong. I was a big fan of the Uncharted movie. I thought it was going to be something that offended me as a fan of the game series. But I really enjoyed the performances of the main cast, even Tom Holland as Nathan Drake. And I believe the chemistry between Nate and Sully in the movie was really good. And that climax was awesome. I hope the inevitable sequel can keep up this energy and even be more in line with the games. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts." It's interesting because I feel like they didn't have chemistry. And I was trying to think of a way to like put this. It reminds me of Ratchet and Clank, where when they went back and remade Ratchet and Clank in 2016, they kind of fixed the fatal flaw of the first game, which was we want Ratchet and Clank to like each other. That's part of it. Part of the charm of those games is that they're friends. And in the first game, they're really not. And so they kind of went and fixed that in the game to make that more lovable pair that we know in all the other games true from the very beginning. I feel like Tom Holland does a pretty nice job as Nathan Drake. He's different than Drake in a lot of different ways. The story is just different, and that's fine. But they make Sully into an asshole. And I want to talk about that in a little while, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on Tom Holland's characterization first and foremost as Drake. Did you buy him?
Yeah, so I think that he overall, a lot of it comes down to, I think, some of the lines that they wrote for him. And I feel like half of it, like the quick quips or whatever, like the smart ass type things that he would say, about half of them were spot on, where I thought that is something that video game Nathan Drake would say. And then the other half were just kind of felt weird. And I don't know if that was writing or delivery. And it's funny because I was thinking about how we've discussed on Sacred Symbols, how he kind of sandbagged the movie, talking about trying to be cool or stoic. And I felt like I didn't really necessarily get that impression compared to Spider-Man, of course. Like Spider-Man is kind of supposed to be this nerdy dude that's not supposed to be cool and stoic. And so, yeah, it's a different role for him than his other most famous role, of course, is Spider-Man. But I didn't get this like fakeness. I was expecting it to feel fake from him, and I didn't get that at all. I think that talking about, Colin, you mentioned this, the relationship with Sully. I think that comes down to that they had to figure out how to get Nathan and Sully together on this adventure in 30, 40 minutes or whatever. And I think that is probably the worst part of the movie. Maybe not the worst, but weirdly paced, because it just felt Nathan Drake, he's a bartender, and then he meets this guy, and within a short amount of time, they're gallivanting across the world together. And maybe that the idea of the you know, thieves not trusting each other, the double crossing is supposed to be part of that relationship building, but it didn't feel, I don't know, I'm trying to get rid of my feelings of the original story, which it's been so many years since I played Uncharted 3, but Sully kind of helped. He didn't raise Nate, but he took him in at a much younger age. So there was like a longer buildup of trust there where they felt more natural together. And this, they kind of had to put them together really quick.
Yeah, well, it's they have a little bit of it right. Sully is a confidence man, and that does as we learn, I think, in Uncharted 3, that's how they find each other, is Drake kind of trying to get one over on him, and Sully seeing something of himself in Drake. And I understand how they kind of rewrote things. Sam is not connected to Sully in the games, and they made that connection, which I thought was kind of forced, but I guess it's kind of the thing that makes Drake so anticipatory about all of the steps, is because he misses his brother and stuff. That's kind of cool. But I feel like with Drake himself and the way that they meet, it's forced, but I also feel like Drake himself's a little strange. And some of it comes off as weird. This is a weird thing to say, but one of the very few places I feel comfortable in is a craft cocktail bar. Like, that's one of the few places that's like my element. I love craft cocktails. I love just sitting and the way he was bartending in that space would never happen in a bar like that. It was ostentatious and weird. That's like the way people bartend in like Las Vegas at like the Flamingo.
That's like the Jimmy Buffett bar at Las Vegas. Because that's where I've literally seen that.
Right, exactly. So there's like weird things like this where he's a real deep thinking guy. He speaks at one point 16th century Middle Spanish. It's like whatever the case might be, going through the book. And on the other hand, he's doing this weird flash, or whatever they call flair bartending, that doesn't fit in that space. So I just felt like a lot of weird elements were being brought together. Like, why couldn't Drake be a quiet bartender in the craft cocktail bar? Why does he have to be doing all this? And people will say, oh, it's because he's stealing shit from people. But I'm like, he could do that much more sly. When he's expressing something over a glass or pouring something, because he does it to the girl outside when he takes her bracelet. So right. There was weird stuff like that where I felt they were trying to make this Drake character into this more crazy character than he really was. And I think that was the thing that felt most inauthentic about Drake, because I actually liked Tom Holland's quipping and joking, and they did seem to get like the back and forth between Sully and Nate pretty right. But I've struggled more with Sully. I want to talk about him. Jose Mendoza wrote in and said, "Hey, CDC, let me start by saying I enjoyed the movie for what it was, and it felt like a small Uncharted adventure that we could have played on the Vita. I did feel like Sully was miscast, and there have been so many actors that would have fit the role better. What actor would you have picked to play Sully over Mark? I would have gone with Bryan Cranston. That actually would have been a pretty interesting choice. Although, for me, it's just, I think someone like even John Hamm would have been interesting in that role. But I didn't believe Sully, and I didn't like Sully. And here's the thing before I throw it over to you, I want to say this. Dagan and I just did Knockback about Uncharted Drake's Fortune, so I've refamiliarized myself with that game pretty intimately. I've beaten it like 5 times in my life, but I watched like a full playthrough of it. And there's a really important scene in that game where Elena asks Drake, do you really trust this guy? After he gets shot and they find out that he's alive with Roman, and it looks like he's working with Roman. And we'll speak about Roman later on in the conversation, of course. And he says something like, he basically shrugs her off as if it's unthinkable that Sully would double cross him. And I wanted to see more of that Drake and Sully. And what I think they could have done is to just make it so that they already knew each other. We could have even gotten their intro story later. In fact, we could have gotten their intro story with other actors, because maybe they were both younger. So what did you think about Sully? It seems like the common theme here from our listeners is that a lot of people didn't buy this act, and that Mark Wahlberg's basically playing himself, which is fine. I like Mark Wahlberg. I actually find him quite likable. It's just, It's not Sully. It's not Sully. And Sully is such an important grounding element to Uncharted, and I found it lacking there.
So here's what I thought was really strange as well about the Mark Wahlberg, is that there are things they could have done to make him more Sully-like. And now I don't want to, in order to say this point fully, I have to acknowledge the end credits part where suddenly,
say it.
At the very end in this post-credit scene, he becomes Sully. He has a mustache. He's wearing the shirts with the design. He's got the cigar. And
he's got the Magnum revolver, which is his weapon. So
it makes no sense. I was like, well, here's the funny part, Colin, is that we were at dinner and I said, I know there is a post-credit scene. I will bet money that Mark Wahlberg has a mustache in it, and that's the main of the thing. And I was so thrilled and disappointed that I was right in the movie theater. But I was like, why would you? I don't know. Sully in the movie with his, I don't know. I'm trying to remember even what he was wearing. It didn't look like stuff that Sully would wear. And it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, well, this is a younger Nathan Drake and a younger Sully, but I don't really know if there's anything about him that really felt like Sully other than he called Nathan. He was like, yeah, kid. And that's like kind of the full extent of it. It's like, why couldn't Mark Wahlberg just have the mustache and smoke cigars? That would have been a little something that would have made his character lend more to the game, which, and my initial reaction is like, okay, well, maybe they want to go a new direction with Sully, which that's whatever. Maybe we agree with that. Maybe we don't. But then you have that end credit scene where they make him way more Sully-like. It's like, well, why couldn't he have just been that the whole movie? It makes no sense to me. But the only major cringe Sully moment I thought was the joke with the phone when he's like, oh, you got Tinder on here? And he's like, oh, you got me. You know, he's like, guilty as charged. It's like, what?
Yeah. It's
what was that moment? I was like, that was weird.
It is strange. I feel like they missed there. There's no doubt that they got pretty close with Nathan Drake. I didn't mind it. I think that they intentionally went out of their way for people like me that were saying, Tom Holland's kind of small, isn't he? Like, and he's not imposing. Like Drake is like a more imposing figure.
Right.
Now he's not Kratos or something like that. But they went out of their way to really show Tom Holland buff as fuck. Like, oh man. And I like that they did that because it pays off in seeing all the acrobatics and all the things later on where you kind of understand that he can maybe do these amazing things, although they're absolutely incredible things that would never happen. But I like that they gamified it a little bit, the airplane sequence and all that, which we'll get to. But I feel like character is most important. I feel like Nate and Sully's relationship is the absolute essence of Uncharted, even more than Nate and Elena, even more than any other combination of characters. And when they're robbing the museum in the beginning, which is a really awesome scene, I love that, like all the lights and he's hanging from it. It's really cool. It's strange to me that they immediately introduce these characters and then Sully is happy to just leave Nate and get caught. And I'm like, that would never happen. That would never happen. Sully would never do that to Nate ever. And that just from the get-go, I was like, no, you don't get Sully. You're totally making him out to be this. And it felt like Ratchet and Clank. Like the original Ratchet and Clank, where I'm like, I want you guys to like each other and trust each other. Stop betraying each other and stop backstabbing each other and doing all these things, like each other. And it felt out like Ratchet and Clank, where I'm like, just please kiss. You know, I want you to kiss. So should we leave? Do you have anything else to say about those two characters and their relationship before we move on?
I don't think so. I think that maybe this is just if we want to give them some benefit of the doubt that the next film we can see that buddy where maybe they've I imagine it picking up a few years later. They've got a couple more adventures under their belt. And so this is a problem that I think that they can easily solve moving forward with the series, which is good. But yeah, I don't know, the Mark, I think it really does come down to, even I mentioned the mustache and the way they made him more Sully-like at the end. Even at its best, I think that they could have picked many other actors. But like you said, Mark Wahlberg, he's fine. He's a charming guy. He did as good as he could, but overall, definitely one of the weaker aspects.
What did you make of Chloe appearing. I actually didn't know Chloe was going to be in this at all. Sophia Ali plays Chloe. I didn't know that they were going to bring her in. I thought that was actually pretty well done. I just I feel like they're through a few. There actually aren't very many characters, but it's a shame that they even make it more than it should be like Drake, Sully, Moncada, and maybe Joe Braddock or whatever. And that's like enough. Like it's almost we have no Elena, we have no other. So seeing Chloe, I thought was like, all right, now everyone's gonna be double and triple crossing each other, and it goes on and on and on and on, which is a little bit disappointing with her. But I thought it was pretty good. I liked Chloe.
Yeah, I had no idea that Chloe was going to be in this movie, which I think that she's even on the movie poster. So I probably should have connected the dots there. But anyway, man, I think I have a crush on this girl that plays Chloe because she was really fantastic. And it's one of those things where, I don't know, Chloe is somewhere between like a major and a minor character. I feel like in some ways, like has a big role in Uncharted 2. I'm trying to remember if she's even in Uncharted 3. Is she?
I think she is, yeah.
And then she's not in Uncharted 4 at all until the Lost Legacy DLC. But overall, I thought that she was cool because at points where I expected her to be not double crossing anymore, she still kind of surprised me and was like, oh, she actually is really thinking for herself, which that's always the feeling I got from her from the games. But overall, I thought she was great. I thought she was one of the more fun parts of this movie.
Yeah, she was good. Sophia Ali, beautiful, definitely, but compelling and seemed pretty true to form. She didn't have that same. Chloe has that raspy voice that it's irreplicable, really.
Yeah,
and they just kind of bring her in a slightly different way, but she's a similar character, a little younger. Maybe we're seeing her at a younger age, so her and Drake are intersecting at a different age than they would in the games. I liked her. I wish that they brought her along for the whole thing. I was a little disappointed that they, in all of the double and triple and quadruple crossing that's going on, she tries to betray Drake in the hotel room. He understands and anticipates that, sends her on her wild goose chase. It's like, why couldn't we all just be together now at this point? What did that add to it? Because then it would have been tempting, not to get too ahead of ourselves. We know we're going to get a sequel, not only because they tease it at the end of the movie, but because the movie's doing so well that they're obviously going to do a sequel. But you can imagine a situation where, since they're playing around with the world in a different way than the games, it would be interesting if Drake knew Chloe first. And then Elena comes in. And that's what causes the complications between, the love triangle there that's kind of in the game. And so I feel like they kind of lost that a little bit by having her double cross them again. And I thought that was kind of stupid, like needless. But Wiley or Willie, it's with an E, so it is Wiley. I don't know. Olmstead says, do you think it was unrealistic that Chloe and Nate didn't hook up? I was going to say, one of the scenes that I liked the most in the film was that they imply that they do. But this is what I'm talking about taste, right? I'm a real prude with sex in movies and TV shows. I've gone over and over, and I just don't need to see it. I don't care. You can allude to it. It's like person at their most private. I don't think we need to see that. And I thought that was like beautifully handled, because she's in bed, he's up, then she's up and he's in bed, and they intersect at some point, and you kind of just put two and two together, and it's not really important, but you kind of assume it happened, and it's very tasteful. So I actually dug that. What did you think about all that?
Yeah, I agree that it was just enough that you're like, okay, yeah, they probably did the dirty together, and good for them or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I don't want to see Nathan Drake, whether it's in a game or in this movie, hook up with anybody and be detailed in any sense, just because I don't know. It's not that type of thing. Like, I don't want to see Indiana Jones fuck somebody, especially now. Like, it's not necessary for this type of adventure. So I think that was tastefully done. And I think it was important to show the implication, just because assuming there's going to be a love triangle in the future films, that I think is a necessary thing to at least somewhat portray.
Yeah, I don't hate the idea of Drake knowing Chloe first. I don't hate that idea. As long as
Mhm.
he ends up with Elena, that's important.
Right. Yes.
And she was missing here, but we'll talk about her in a little while. Let's talk about Antonio Banderas. Angel de Jesus wrote in, said, "Hi guys. I like the movie, but did you feel like I did that Antonio Banderas was kind of wasted here? His death, while a good turn of events, left his skills as an actor wasted. What did you think?" This is another thing where I was wondering what was the point of that. It just didn't seem to make any sense. You don't need more intrigue and more characters. Just have it be about this dude. He kills his dad and then he is killed kind of anticlimactically, but we don't really care about him. So when he's killed on the plane, it's like, okay, I mean, whatever. They should have focused more on him. I mean, Antonio Banderas is a pretty big name, pretty interesting person to see. I don't think he's like the best actor in the world. In fact, my nephew Declan was like laughing because he was basically just playing Antonio Banderas, which is what he does, and that's fine. We were talking about that with Mark Wahlberg. But I just found that peculiar. I don't think we needed another layer down. It was cool to have Braddock as his muscle,
Right.
but he needed to stay around. Like, why couldn't he stay around? It was just kind of needless. I feel like there were 4 or 5 turns the movie took where I'm like, you don't need to do that. You didn't need to do that. You don't need to do that. It could have all gone in the same direction, but you didn't need to have Chloe go alone. You didn't need to have him killed. You didn't need to blah, blah, blah. And I felt like that was a pretty fundamental thing because it felt totally MacGuffin-ish to me.
Yeah. So this was the first point of discussion when we left the theater before we were walking out. And I think it was Brandon's girlfriend, Lauren, who was like, why did they kill that guy? And why did it just didn't make any sense? Like, obviously, in a movie like this, you have a man jumping from thing to thing outside of a plane. We know it's not real, but you still expect some set of guidelines and rules within the story that makes sense. And I'm like, so they're on this guy's plane and Braddock slices his throat and suddenly she's in charge. Everyone's now loyal to her. Okay, so she somehow staged a coup, but he killed his dad in order to get the money in order to fund this operation. And so now Braddock is just, does she just, now she's in charge? Like she doesn't have the money. So what happens afterwards? Like that made no sense to me. Like at all. And it's so weird because like you said, they build it up. He kills his dad. You're like, whoa, this fucker is a bad dude. He killed his dad. And now he's like doing this like supervillain speech talking about how, his family line, this is what they've always wanted. And then he's dead. And then it's just like, okay, well, she's in charge now. Okay. I don't know. I was thinking in my head, I was like trying to figure out a way that this makes sense. And it just doesn't make any sense. And I don't have no clue, even just trying to play devil's advocate, like why they would do this at all.
My only thought, and this is probably not true, is just like, did you only have Banderas for like a very limited time or something? Did you not? Is he only going to be in a few minutes and you have to kind of but then you have him on the tarmac with the car, but you don't have him doing this and all that. I just felt like that was a waste. And I think it was more intriguing. His whole obsession with the treasure was intriguing. It was very intriguing. By the time Braddock kills him, then I'm like, well, this is just now stupid treasure hunting that they're going to try to flip the ships and get rid of the gold and all of that. But this guy had like some sort of drive that I felt like was worthy of exploration and caused him enough to have this bad relationship with his father and all the rest. So I found that peculiar and unneeded and unnecessary. And another thing that I think that they got pretty wrong, especially with the weaker characterization of the main characters, and also just the suggestion that this really reiterated in my mind why The Last of Us being a series is just such a better idea. This would have actually been a pretty interesting series, because then we could have taken our time and fleshed all this out and not felt like everything just needed to kind of connect. And you can imagine the writers were saying, well, we need to somehow get this Banderas character. He's interested in the cross. He hires Chloe and Braddock. They are revolving around that, but Chloe has the other cross, so she's involved. And so they probably felt like they needed to have this extra character, which is this villain. And they should have just maybe cut out the Braddock character, if anything else. So I felt that was a little weird. All right, let's see what else here. I want to talk about a few other things. Oh, this is an interesting one from Paul McFerrin. He says, hey, fellas, Did anyone else notice Nate didn't pick up a gun until the climax of the film? Not only that, but he missed badly. Nitpicks aside, this was a standout issue for me. Why neuter a standout feature of the game and action movies in general? Do you think this is the unfortunate byproduct of Sony trying to protect Holland's golden boy image? Love the show, boys. Keep up the fantastic work. That was peculiar. I don't mind it because I think it's comical how many people Nate kills, and it's nice to see that not really happening, because we talk about suspension of disbelief, and that's the thing you have to suspend your disbelief in with the games is Nathan is killing hundreds of people per game, and that's just unbelievable. So I like that they got away with that, but it did seem that they were trying to not make it as overtly violent. But then you see real acts of violence, the likes of which you would never see in Uncharted. You would never see someone get their neck slit in an Uncharted game. That wouldn't happen. I don't remember that ever happening. Do you? Maybe someone walks behind someone else and cuts their neck open like it's the fucking Last of Us.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. So I found that a little unbalanced. What do you think about the violence?
Well, I can understand this is a younger Nate, and maybe he hasn't gotten his bloodthirst yet. He hasn't killed anybody. In fact, it's at the very beginning of the movie when he kicks that guy when they're hanging out of the plane. He's like, "I'm so sorry," and then that guy's clearly dead. So he does murder someone at the very beginning of the movie. But there's a way that they had to balance, like, okay, we don't want Nathan Drake to be the murderous psychopath in this movie like he's in the game, because it won't translate, I think, the same way. But at the same time, I think it is important that I think it was the first time they used the actual Uncharted theme in the movie is when they have him put on the gun holsters, right? So at the same time, I did feel like it was missing something, that he wasn't, I don't know, shooting at people, I guess, at more points in the movie. It's like there can be a couple gunfights and we not think that Nate is like a murderous, on a rampage. Like, I thought of spoilers for Indiana Jones, very old movie, but it's like you can still have a heroic character that maybe kills somebody somewhat unjustly. I think about the guy with the sword in Indiana Jones that he just pulls out the gun and shoots. Like, that's an amazing moment. We're still rooting for Indiana Jones because it's a movie. It's fake, whatever. He's our hero. So I would have liked to see more Nathan Drake shootings, but at the same time, I think it makes sense from a story perspective that they kind of ease into that. But I did think it was a nice moment when they have the Uncharted theme playing and he has the holster on, and you're like, oh man, this is the moment maybe where, if we're seeing the origin of Nathan Drake, this is the moment that he fully achieves what he's going to be like going forward.
I wanted to ask you about what you thought about some of the things that they borrowed from the films. This movie is a lot like Uncharted 4 with Uncharted 3 elements in it. So obviously the auction scene that's literally in Uncharted 4.
Right.
And there are a few other things too. And we'll talk about the end, because the end, I think, invokes the first game pretty obviously. What did you make about the various elements they decided to kind of not steal? I don't want to say that's totally wrong. The kind of things that they wanted to rip out of the games. There's the cargo plane from Uncharted 3. The young Drake stuff begins in Uncharted 3 as well. We have the scene in the auction from Uncharted 4. You can look at a lot of the stuff in the sewers and all the different Roman ruins in several of the games. I wonder what you felt about how and why and where they pulled. One of the things that I love, one of my favorite scenes in Uncharted is the cruise ship scene, and I hope that they like where you're like on it and then it starts to sink and then you're like climbing up, and I hope to God that that's in the second one, because that is the coolest. But I thought they did a really nice job of selecting some iconographic elements, especially the plane scene. Now the plane scene is ridiculous. It really comes out as ridiculous in a movie. It doesn't feel so ridiculous in the game, but like that would just never. There's so many things wrong with that scene, but that's fine. It was fun. What did you think about all that?
Yeah. So the plane scene, that was something I was saying on the car ride home, is that when you see Nathan Drake leap from one cargo container to another while it's hanging out of a plane that's flying through the air, in a video game, you think, wow, that's ridiculous. But it's a computer generated character doing it. So you're willing to suspend disbelief, which I don't watch a lot of these big budget action movies. That's not really ever been my thing. But I said, when you see a human man do that on film, like pull himself and fling himself to the next cargo thing, it I it looks a little too much for me. But at the same time, I was like okay with it. It looked unrealistic and stupid, but in a good way to me. Like, I kind of expected that from an Uncharted movie, but it was just funny breaking it down in my mind. Like, this does not connect the same way that a game would. But as far as the overarching idea of using select scenes from the game, I actually think that this is a kind of clever and mostly positive way in order to turn a game into a movie. And that is, you take the characters and you make their how they are established in this world similar, but not exactly the same. We talked about how there are some elements that could have been better. But then, instead of doing literal translation of the game, like, this isn't Uncharted Drake's Fortune, the movie. You take moments and scenes from the game and you incorporate them into the movie in a way that makes sense. And I actually thought that that was a big pro for this movie, is that we could, smile when we see these individual moments and be like, man, I remember doing that in the game, and here it is in this movie. And we don't have to be annoyed that the way they translate it isn't like literally the same, or it's too much, or it's too little. It's kind of somewhere in between. And I think that that's kind of a nice way to do it. And it made me think about the future of this series and other scenes that I'm excited to see. You mentioned the cruise ship. I was thinking about the scene from the opening of Uncharted 2 where the train is hanging off the cliff.
Of course.
That is just an absolutely iconic moment, and was my introduction to playing Uncharted, since I dove right into Uncharted 2 when around the time it came out. And thinking about how this movie primarily takes place either in cities or in like a tropical environment. And I'm curious about, will we get, maybe in a second or third movie, them in the desert or them in like a mountainous area? Like, there's a lot of different places and things that they can pull from. And obviously they laid the seed with his brother, of course. So, but we'll get into that later. But overall, I like this idea of just incorporating set piece moments. I don't know if it would work for a lot of other games, but I think in a series like Uncharted, where we could lay out all 4 games and then we could probably list 4 or 5 set piece moments, and then using those and incorporating them into a film, I thought that little that creative freedom to do that actually worked out.
Yeah, well said. I feel like it's funny because you brought up the train in Uncharted 2. Pacing wise, they kind of did take Uncharted 2, because we start with the cargo ship or the cargo plane, very similar to the way the game Uncharted 2 starts with the train. And then we find out about halfway through how you got into that situation, which is exactly what ends up happening in Uncharted 2. So they did borrow clearly a lot from a lot of these different places. One thing they didn't borrow from the games is supernaturalism, though. And this is something that people were curious about. Fawn wrote in and said, "Hey, CDC, I thought the movie was a fun movie and that the actors did well despite a bare-bones script with average dialogue. The director, Ruben Fleischer, explained that the movie didn't have supernatural elements as he wanted to have the movie be consistently grounded. This movie adapted Uncharted 4's story and added some aspects from the other games, but it seems like the key staple of the original Uncharted trilogy, the supernatural element of the treasure, should have been featured. Do you think the supernatural element is something that should have been brought back in... do you think the supernatural element is something that should be brought back in future Uncharted movies or Uncharted games for that matter? There was something about that was off, but I didn't mind it because it's funny. In doing Drake's Fortune recently and reading what people thought about that game and in the submissions we got from the audience, a lot of people didn't like when Uncharted Drake's Fortune became something else, when you meet the Spanish and all that in that game. So I wonder what you make of the lack of a supernatural element. This all seems to be quite... It felt... You know what this felt more like, which was funny? It felt more like Dan Brown than Uncharted, in the sense that it felt like the Da Vinci Code. They're going around
Mm.
putting crosses into things, and they're running around Rome. The cops seem to be not interested at all. These are invaluable antiquities that they're destroying. No one seems to care. And then so they move forward with this. But anyway, what do you make of the lack of supernaturalism?
I think that this is I'm kind of feeling mixed about this because in some ways I feel like Uncharted, as it grew up, so to say, on the PS3, and obviously there were also there's supernatural elements in all three, but with Uncharted 4, I feel like it made sense for them to ground the series at that point. And so with this film kind of taking a lot of elements of Uncharted 4, it makes sense to me that they wanted to keep it grounded. So I'm kind of mixed. I don't know whether I want them to include it because looking back, I think that I don't want to say that the supernatural elements were a mistake in the old ones, but I feel like it's kind of a weird tonal inconsistency in a way for me. And maybe that's just because Uncharted 4 is the most fresh on my mind right now. But I think it would be strange in the films for them to add supernatural elements now. It's like you kind of do it from the start or you don't do it ever. Because I feel like I don't know how audiences would react because I already didn't really know how they would react to this movie to begin with. So to do that might be a mistake, but I honestly, I don't know. In some ways, I wonder if you have like what is it? Were they like Wendigos in Uncharted 1? Like the weird.
Yeah, they're these like mutated
Yeah.
alien looking creatures.
It's almost like I don't know about introducing supernatural creatures into Uncharted. I think that the films, I think that might be too far, but having like a strange lost city in the desert that only appears when certain things happen or whatever, that might be okay. But I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing now. Who knows what they'll do?
Let's talk about some of the other action scenes. Tyler Brown was curious and said, "Hey guys, what were your thoughts during the pirate ship helicopter fight at the end of the movie?" Personally, I felt like that would have been something that could work very well in an Uncharted game. Have a good one. I was thinking the same thing as Drake was jumping between the helicopters. That definitely could work as a game set piece. As a lover of history, I was cringing because they're just these galleons are just. I'm like, oh, these are beautiful ships, and then they both end up getting obliterated. Basically, what a goddamn shame that is. But it's a cool scene. I like it. I like the ode again to Uncharted 4 of finding the ship. I think it was one ship in the cavern. So they find two. These guys are all over getting this thing out of there. I mean, they know exactly what they're doing. They're ready to go with this G.I. Joe looking helicopter and the nets around the ships and all of this. It was pretty funny. But yeah, what do you make of this action scene and the other action in the game, or the movie? I brought up earlier, I really liked the museum scene. I thought that was like a lot of fun. Again, one of the things that I was confused about was like, where are the police in all of these scenes? Yeah. This is like madness. They're especially the one in Europe. And then anyway, what did you think of that?
I thought that the ending, the climax with the boats and the helicopters, or the ships, I should say, was fantastic. It could be in an Uncharted game, and it was the right level of craziness for me that it's just like, damn, you have these old ships soaring through the air. You have people fighting on them. They're ramming into each other. And for some reason, that scene, I mean, of course, none of it is believable. It doesn't have to be. It's a fun action movie. But that scene at the end was more enjoyable for me because it wasn't as blatantly unrealistic as the plane scene, and so I was able to really enjoy that one. But trying to think as far as the other scenes, like the auction scene was really cool. I think that like you said, him hanging on the lights was cool. But that was another thing we brought up after the movie was done. That I was like, man, how do they feel that just like this, this snotty kid basically just like walked out. He just like figured out a way completely. This should be one of the most secure locations in the city because they're dealing with artifacts that are worth combined millions and millions of dollars. And he just fucking weasels his way out into a car that drives away. But I feel like, though, at the same time, that's probably an Uncharted thing that would happen. I just maybe our suspension of disbelief is different when we're seeing real people as opposed to video game characters.
Sure. Makes sense to me. We have to talk about Nolan North. Too Far Frame wrote in and said Nolan North cameo sold me. Other than Mark Wahlberg's terrible not at all Sully impression, it was a pretty great adaptation. So I sadly knew that Nolan North was in the movie. So I expected, I just had heard that or read that somewhere that he had a cameo. So I was kind of looking for it. And it's funny, when they showed up, I didn't know it was going to be so obvious. I was like looking in the background because that's what I thought he was going to be. I thought actually on the plane scene when she kills Antonia Banderas and all of this, I thought he might have been one of the henchmen or something, but so I was like looking for him, and then finally they bash you over the head with it. It was cool to see him, and I like that they did a few odes to the old games. There's the Naughty Dog sticker in his chest, and I love him putting on the holster in the boat, that, you know, his classic Drake holster. There were cool little touches like that. But what did you think specifically of seeing Nolan North on the beach?
I was absolutely thrilled when I saw him on the beach, and it surprised me just how there was no reaction from the packed theater overall of seeing him, because I'm guessing most people there did not have any clue who he was or what was going on with that at all. But I thought that the way they did that cameo was so respectful, and maybe I'm looking into it too much, but I'm trying to remember. He says, "Oh, did you fall out of a plane or something?" And Nathan says, "Yeah, something like that." And he says, "Oh, that happened to me. Something like that happened to me once too." And I love that just because it implies like this is the original Nathan Drake. He is this happen. You know, we consider Nolan North as like the archetype Nathan Drake, and I like that there was that level of respect, that he wasn't just some guy in the background, that it kind of implied like, yeah, he's the original Nathan Drake, but you know, so can Tom Holland can now also be Nathan Drake. I don't know if it was like a passing of the torch moment or anything like that. I don't want to overblow it, but I felt like it was a respectful way to acknowledge Nolan North and I mean, he didn't create Nathan Drake, but he defined that character through that performance. And so there's a lot owed to him from that. And so I thought that was a really, really nice moment. I reacted. I try not to annoy anybody in theater because I'm easily annoyed, but I like stood up, like not stand on my feet, but I like arched up because I was so pumped when I saw him.
Yeah, it was nice to see him. And I agree. They did show a lot of respect to him, and he will always be Nathan Drake first and foremost. Just he's just can't replicate that performance. I want to ask you about what I think is the worst scene. And Luke Tucker wrote in and said, "Guys, I'm in a Papa John's." And then he goes on to say nice things about it. But I'm not going to read any of that, Luke.
Don't.
This Papa John's scene was brutal because this brings to bear all the things I was saying. First of all, where are the cops? Now there's a gun in play. They're shooting it. There's a fight. He gets in and just throws the table, starts fist. It gets like crazy. I just found that so unbelievable, but I'm like, what? So you're in Barcelona, beautiful, ancient Barcelona. And wouldn't it have been cooler if it was in like a nice restaurant and you had to have some sort of, they could have done this totally different. And instead of having it in a friggin' Papa John's, it was so stupid and such a obvious, just money making, just brutal over the head sort of situation. I didn't like that at all. And it was a shame just because I like the idea of the keyhole being in this really inopportune thing, but it would have been cool if it was like when they were in the underground tunnels and they find it in that underground rave bar. That was cool. I was like, yeah, that's cool. But fucking, I don't know. I just hated that. I just hated it. What did you think of that?
I think this is a Sony Pictures problem overall, in that the last time I saw product placement that was this egregious was when I saw Ghostbusters Afterlife, which this is in a trailer, but basically when the shit starts going down in that movie, it happens in a fucking Walmart. And he's going into the Walmart to find some Baskin Robbins ice cream. And it's like, what? Why? Like, and this is exactly what that felt like, which I think that the 2016 Ghostbusters also heavily featured Papa John's product placement as well, which was also a Sony thing. And it's just like, man, there's ways that you can do I think that, let me restart. I understand product placement. It's a way to get an easy bag for some of these movies. And I think that there's ways that you can do it that are subtle enough that it's not really bothersome. But when you have Sully like, hey, I'm in a Papa John's right now, it's like, take it easy. I mean, seriously, like, could we have done this any more obvious than the part of the treasure path is a Papa John's pizza? And there's other product placement, but it's more subtle. Like I'm pretty sure they only use Sony phones.
Yeah, they have
movie,
Xperia phones, yeah.
Yeah, and that's like a common thing for them. But yeah, I absolutely hate this. Sony, get it together with this product placement shit because it's annoying. And I don't really know what else there is to say about it other than it was just completely cringe.
And also, where was the PlayStation product placement? I'm sure there might be a PS4 or PS5 in the background somewhere, but there would have been cooler having that more over the head, like having someone in the background playing something or whatever. I think that would have been cool. By the way, what did you think of the studio sequence in the beginning? That had been circulating, but to see it on the big screen was really cool.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I was when I was watching in the theater again, I was thinking like, man, I know every character in this lineup here, but it was like a few rows down from me. I'm serious. There's like 6 or 7 teenage girls in this theater, and there's just no reaction from them at all. Or I think they were even maybe looking at their phones at this point. And I thought, man, this is interesting because this whole cross, like getting more people involved or interested in PlayStation IP through film very well may work because there's so many people here that just wouldn't give a shit at all about this type of film. In fact, I mentioned to Holly the other night, like after we had saw it last night, I said, it's kind of brilliant how this works out because if you think about a couple that's in their early 20s and the guy says, hey, let's go see Uncharted. And the girl says, what's that? It's like, oh, well, it's a movie of this game series I really like. And the girl says, no, I don't want to see that. He's like, oh, well, it's got Tom Holland in it. He was Spider-Man. And it's got Mark Wahlberg. And it's like, oh, well, I like Tom Holland. Let's go. And then suddenly, and if they both enjoy the movie, then they're both interested. And maybe the girlfriend or a boyfriend, it could be the other way around. Maybe they would be interested in checking out Uncharted, the games or whatever. So it since I've seen it play out, it makes more sense to me now, I guess.
Fair enough. CJ Hines wrote in. Oh, actually, you know what? Before I read CJ Hines' thing, I do want to, on that note, actually, might as well get this in here. On Chem Talk said, hey guys, I really enjoyed this movie, especially as someone who isn't super familiar with Uncharted. However, there's a key element of this film that needs to be discussed. The movie serving as a gateway into the games. Thanks to seeing this movie and enjoying it, I went ahead and picked up a copy of the Nathan Drake collection, and I'm looking forward to giving these games a shot. Thanks for the great show. Thank you on Chem Talk. So yeah, to your point. Now, CJ Hines, over to you. Hey guys, Uncharted has one of the best musical scores in video games, and they barely use it. But when they did, it definitely gave me some feels. That was the most disappointing part for me. Overall, I was pleasantly surprised that the movie didn't suck and had a good time with it. Did you guys think the score was lacking? I did notice that. I'm not much of a person that tunes in on that sort of thing, but I did notice its lack of use because when it was used, I was like, oh yeah, especially at the end when it really fills and comes to a crescendo. What did you make about the scoring and maybe the lack of iconography when it came to the audio?
I can understand them wanting to save the Uncharted theme for the moment when he puts on the holster, because that was a really, really nice, fun moment, especially for fans. But overall, I did feel like some of the other music they used or made for this film just felt kind of bland. There was like some weird parts where I don't remember it exactly, but it was like a guitar part. It was like, like it almost felt like a weird actiony spy type thing, which I guess that maybe they're trying to go for that since they're like planning out how to steal something or whatever. But overall, I thought the score was kind of not very good. But it's like, why not pull from more of the Uncharted music? I mean, it's all so well done that it just seems obvious to do that. But I don't know. I don't make movies, so maybe it wasn't as easy as just like lifting and adapting the score, and it would be a lot more difficult.
let's go here and talk about the end and the end sequence and then the future of these films. John O'Peck wrote in and said, I don't think Nathan Drake shot a single bad guy in this whole movie. What gives? But seriously, despite every red flag heading into this movie, Tom Holland did a great job with what he was given, which was a totally different version of Nathan Drake than the one we know from his life experience to his physicality. Once I got over the key differences from the Drake and Sully we already love, both characters lived up to the spirit of what makes them great. The movie captures a lot of the sense of adventure, sense of humor, while touching on the themes of determination and greed that hypnotize our hero at different points in the games. Now that they're actually fond of each other, I feel like the next film has set up to be more of a buddy comedy we're used to from Drake and Sully. Do you think a sequel will happen? And do you think it feels more promising than this endeavor? So, definitely. I mean, there's going to be a sequel. They're already talking about it as a franchise at Sony Pictures. The end sequences indicate that there'll be a sequel as well. Yeah, I'm interested in it now. As to the point Dustin made early in the episode, they've kind of established some more of the mores that make Uncharted function, specifically with Sully and his visuals. The big question is what they're teasing, and what's fun about that sequence at the end is that's all Uncharted 1 stuff. And I wonder if now that they've established this, that they'll go back and try to tell that story, because they talk about Roman, who is the bad guy in Uncharted 1. They talk about a Nazi document, which is a reference to Uncharted 1. Of course, we see the U-boat and all that in that game. So it's interesting to think about the potential. And of course, people were writing in too, like, who do they see when they turn around? That could be Sam. I think it could be Elena. So what do you think? What's on your mind here for the sequel? What's on your mind for the end and the way they kind of set things up?
Yeah, I think that the sequel has a lot of potential to be even better than this movie from multiple angles. Just like we talked about, the fact that we now have established characters. We don't have to introduce Nathan Drake. We don't have to introduce Sully and their relationship. They can kind of just get right into it. And in addition, I think that they can probably take some of the feedback and incorporate that into the movie, whether it's making Sully more actually like Sully. That's probably I think the biggest single piece of feedback, for since he's such a prominent character, which it already seems like they're moving in that direction. The question, of course, will be moving forward with that tease of it being Uncharted 1. Is it going to be a straight, I don't want to say straight, but a very focused on Uncharted 1 overall? And then you get into the question, it's like, okay, well, is this the point now that we're going to go through the games when you've already kind of did a lot of the stuff from Uncharted 4 or whatever? But I don't know, that's way future thinking. But overall, I am excited to see them move forward with it at this point. As much as, I don't know, I think that people could listen to our conversation here, and we've been critical overall, but I think I should be clear that even though I think, what did I say at the beginning? Like it some parts were just passable and there was a lot of negative stuff. I think overall, especially now that it was Saturday, I saw the movie and it's Monday that we're recording, I think that I'm more positive on this movie as time goes by. And I'm thinking that it will, I don't know, maybe that's just because I'm forgiving it because I'm forgetting some of the bad parts. But overall, I'm excited to see more.
Yeah, I'm interested to see more. I have no problem with that. I think that this is a great starting point. I don't think it could get any worse than that. And I think it makes it sound bad, but it's like, it's not going to get any worse than that. And if that's the starting point, then that's pretty good. So I think one thing I'm concerned about, or not concerned about, but kind of confused about, is that Tom Holland wasn't speaking very fondly of this role and this experience in the time leading up to the movie coming out. And now that it's a thing, I don't know how you walk some of that stuff back. Not that it really matters ultimately, and I'm sure he's happy to do it for the money, but it just didn't seem like a role that he was going to deal with beyond this one film. And I think he kind of had those expectations. And you got to give it up to Uncharted based on the reporting at Deadline and other places, Sony Pictures kind of seeing something in this that was better than what people were giving it credit for. And to their credit, that there was something here that gives me some sort of hope that maybe they know what they're doing. And if this is a starting point for what they're going to do with Sony Pictures and their combination with PlayStation Productions, then okay, well, let's see what you got. You know, we know Twisted Metal's coming, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us. That's about it. So beyond that, we'll see what happens. Do you have any closing comments before we go?
Closing comments. I want to reiterate that I was just a big fan of Sophia Ali. I told Holly, I said I got a crush on this girl that plays Chloe, and she said that's fine. It's okay. So shout out to her. And yeah, I guess next up on the slate will be the Last of Us TV show, which we haven't really decided how we're gonna cover. I don't know if we're gonna do. Man, doing a weekly thing for each episode might be much. I don't know though. What
No,
would
I
you want
think.
to do with
I
that?
mean, I do want to do that. I think
You
it's
want to do weekly?
definitely.
Okay.
I think that'll be fun. They might not
Yeah.
be long episodes. They might be 20 or 30 minutes each, but I think that'll be totally gratifying. Get people involved. I think the HBO, whether it's good or not, is another thing. But the HBO show is going to be a big deal, and
Yeah.
that's an expensive ass show. And hey, I wanted to say this. This is an amazing. We've already crossed the inflection point, but this is an amazing illustration, let's say, of what I've been talking about with money. This movie cost about half as much as it would cost to make a AAA Uncharted game today. Keep that in mind. This movie was made for about $100 million. If you want an Uncharted AAA game, you're talking about $200 million probably at this point for that. 5 years, something like that to make it, like a new ground up, studs up Uncharted game. I think that's a nice illustration of just how expensive making video games has become compared to this film, this spectacle that was literally half the cost of what it would cost to make, The Last of Us Part 2 or something. So anyway, Dustin, thank you for joining me today. Appreciate you. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show and for all of your many inquiries. I know I put the thread up late. I forgot to do it. So, but we still got like almost 100 submissions in that very short period of time. So thank you for that.
Nice.
And thank you for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand Media, Knockback, and Defining Duke as well. We'll continue these Sacred Symbols Plus conversations and interviews, one-offs, review discussions will be coming soon on Horizon. We'll get one done on Elden Ring, and we'll get one done for Dying Light, I think, and some others. So lots of different stuff coming. Thank you so much again, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.
See ya.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show was conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you. I think the things that they got wrong are the various ways that they characterize. Hold on a second. Doorbell. I'll just do that all again.
Yep. Okay, putting a marker here to remember, hey, cut this out because Colin is getting a delivery. Just me and Ben right now hanging out here. Doing all right. Just I'm drinking a nice coffee with this podcast, and it's delicious. But the problem is it's making my mouth feel a little milky, which is not really ideal while podcasting. And I wonder, when I pull it up to the mic, I don't want to hear that. That's it's maybe a little distracting. But some people like that feeling of being in the room with us. So maybe I should allow the clanking, so to say. But other than that, though, just want to play Elden Ring. Oh, Colin's back.